We're going to be looking at the urinary system, and the quickest way to think of the kidneys is it is a filter. It is going to excrete the byproducts and basically purify the body. Okay, so if you end up going in kidney failure, then all these toxins start to build up in your body because you're not able to get rid of them. As far as gross anatomy is concerned, here's an anterior view and here's a posterior view. The kidneys, we have two of them. So we have a right and left kidney. Okay, since this person is facing us, that makes this the left side and this is the right side. And you'll also notice that the right kidney does sit a little bit lower than the left, and the reason for that is the liver. Okay, the liver does displace the right kidney, so therefore it sits a bit more inferior than the left. All right, so right and left kidney, and we have a right and left ureter. Okay, so that's this yellow-looking structure that goes from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. Okay, those are the ureters. And you have two of those, a right and left ureter. You have one urinary bladder, so therefore it's just urinary bladder, and the tube that goes from the urinary bladder to the external environment is the urethra. Okay, from a posterior view, the kidneys are protected by the lower kidneys, so the floating ribs 11 and 12. And you can also see here the ureters going into the urinary bladder. And this is a temporary storage tank for the urine. And eventually, when you have that neurological stretch reflex, then you void, also known as micturate, or in layman's terms, just pee or go to the bathroom. All right, the kidneys, this part is pretty important because of the function. Okay, so this class is anatomy and physiology. Also, you could say structure and function. So here's the structure, kidneys. What does it do? All right, it filters the blood and excretes the toxic metabolic waste. Okay, so metabolism, which is good stuff into the cells. Okay, so nutrition, your vitamins and minerals, electrolytes, and all this energy goes into the cells. The cells are going to break down, use it, and so therefore there's a byproduct, so we need to get rid of the waste. Okay, so good stuff in, bad stuff out. In general, your arteries carry all the good stuff to your tissue and cells, and the veins are going to take the byproducts away. So you breathe out carbon dioxide, the kidneys are going to filter out a bunch of stuff from your system. Okay, the kidneys are also responsible for blood volume, blood pressure, and regulating water output. They also help regulate electrolyte and acid-base balance. So going back to acids and bases, we have 0, which is acidic. And then we have 14, which is alkaline. and 7 is neutral. Okay, the body likes to be around 7. And the human body, if left unregulated, would choose to be acidic. So we'd have all these byproducts building up in our body, and therefore that puts us in an acidic state. So we have a lot of built-in buffering systems. Okay, a buffer resists acidity. A buffer is what keeps you neutral, and kidneys are a part of that. Kidneys also secrete erythropoietin. So EPO is the abbreviation for that hormone, which stimulates the production of red blood cells. Kidneys help regulate calcium levels in the body and the synthesis of calcitriol, which is vitamin D. They clear hormones and drugs from the blood. So when anybody takes medication, either the liver or the kidney is going to have to filter out and process that medication. So some medications are hard on the kidneys and some medications are hard on the liver. The kidneys will detoxify free radicals and in extreme starvation support the blood glucose levels by synthesizing glucose from amino acids. Okay, remember when you think of kidneys, just think the quick version when you think of kidneys is it's a filter. Keeps the good stuff, gets rid of the bad stuff, or gets rid of waste. One of the most toxic of our metabolic waste is the nitrogen. Okay, so nitrogenous waste. And what is that? It's ammonia, urea, uric acid, and creatinine. Okay, now creatinine is a byproduct of, so creatine is necessary for muscle contraction. So creatine goes in, the cells use it, the byproduct is creatinine. Your kidneys will help get rid of it. Urea, uric acid are byproducts of protein synthesis or protein breakdown. So we eat the protein and there are some byproducts. So urea and uric acid. In fact, if you have too much uric acid buildup, then which also come from purines, then you get a condition called gout. And ammonia is also a byproduct of amino acid breakdown, which is protein breakdown. Okay, about 50% of the nitrogenous waste is urea, which is a byproduct of protein catabolism. So catabolism is where we break stuff down. Anabolic, we build up. Catabolism, we break down. Proteins are hydrolyzed into amino acids, and then that forms ammonia, which is exceedingly toxic. In fact, it can really hurt the brain. And so the kidneys will help to get rid of that. Okay, there's a lab you can run on somebody called the BUN or blood urea nitrogen. And the words itself tell you exactly what this lab is doing. Blood urea nitrogen. So it's looking for how much urea and nitrogen is building up in the blood. With any kind of lab, there's always normal levels, okay, normal concentration or normal amount, but you can either have too much of that thing or too little of. Okay, in this case, elevated blood urea nitrogen, which is harmful to the body, can indicate renal problems. Okay, so if you run a lab on someone and a lot of these kidney markers show up, well, you're going to focus and start treating the kidney. Some signs and symptoms that the kidneys aren't doing well: diarrhea, vomiting, dyspnea, cardiac arrhythmias. that come from that nitrogenous waste. Can even be convulsions, coma, or even death. And excretion is a process of being able to eliminate these byproducts from the body. So some of the things that help us eliminate is the respiratory system. Okay, we get rid of carbon dioxide. Our skin, so the integumentary system, okay, so this is our skin, is a purging organ, so you can actually sweat out some byproducts. The digestive system will get rid of byproducts, so it eliminates byproducts of food and other metabolic waste, and the urinary system also excretes a lot of byproducts and toxins. Okay, the kidneys are considered to be located what's called retroperitoneal. So they're behind the peritoneum, and they are supplied by the renal artery. So the renal arteries go into the kidneys, and the renal veins will exit the kidneys. So renal is a fancy word for kidney. Okay, another word is nephro, Nephro, nephro. Like a nephrologist is a kidney specialist. So we have kidney, renal, or nephro. Where all the tubes and wires are going in and out of the kidney is called the hilum. Okay, so the hilum of the kidneys, it would be located right here. So everything is going in or out right there at the hilum. All right, some parts of the gross anatomy of the kidney. You do have an outer fibrous capsule. And one way of looking at that, kind of an easy analogy, would be like putting on a leather jacket, right? So the jacket is part of you, it's the outermost layer, and it is protective. Okay, then we have the renal cortex. So that's the cortical margin, which is the outer part of the kidney. Okay, now keep in mind, whenever you see the word cortex, it simply means the outer part of. And when you see the word medulla, okay, so the renal medulla, it means the inner part of. All right, so we have the medulla in the brain, we have the medullary cavity or medulla of bone, which is the middle part. You have the adrenal medulla, which is the middle part, the kidney medulla, which is the middle part. So cortex is simply the outer part, medulla is simply the inner part, and then whatever word it's attached to, then that's what you're describing. So in this case, the renal cortex and the renal medulla, which is all of this. Okay. Cortex is on the outside, the medulla is on the inside. The pyramids, so we have the renal pyramids. They get their name because they are shaped like a pyramid. And in between the pyramids, you have the renal columns. All right, the columns separate the renal pyramids. So I'm going to work backwards on this one. So we have the end result is urine, okay, which is a fluid, and it's going to go down this ureter. Okay, so there's the ureter that goes to the urinary bladder, temporary storage tank for our urine. All right, you'll notice that all of these tubes are heading in one direction, right? So their goal is to funnel all of this fluid eventually down the ureter into the urinary bladder. Okay, so there are some other parts to know. Okay, this area is the renal pelvis. Okay, it's like a funnel. Okay, the renal pelvis, which will funnel into the ureter. Okay, again, working backwards here from the renal pelvis, you have the calyces. Okay, so the renal calyces. And they all come from the pyramids. Okay, you'll notice that these tubes are connected into the pyramids. And inside the pyramids, you're going to find the nephrons. Now, we'll cover nephrons in a little bit. Okay, and here is the renal artery. Blood is coming in, and then there's the renal vein. Blood would be exiting the kidney. All right, this next part is important with renal circulation. Even though the kidneys are very light, only about 0.4% of our body weight, they receive about 1.1 liter of blood per minute and are about 21% of the cardiac output. So they are heavily involved with blood pressure and its relationship with the heart. And the reason for this is for the body's ability to be able to remove waste. You also need the heart, which is a pump, to push hard enough to actually push fluid into the kidneys. So if a person's blood pressure is too low, then they can't even perfuse an organ. Okay, so perfusion means the pump, which is the heart, is pumping hard enough to push fluid into an organ like the kidney. All right, so let's look at that circulation. All right, so the red would represent things in the artery family, and the blue would represent things in the vein family. Arteries go away from the heart, which means they supply the body, and the arteries are taking all the good stuff to the tissues and cells of the body. Cells are going to use it, break it down. There's a metabolic byproduct, which means it's eventually going to get into the vein system and be sent back to the heart. Okay, so starting with the aorta, it's going to go down the aorta and then the descending aorta, so the thoracic aorta, and eventually going to hit the renal artery. Okay, and then it's going to segment or branch out, right? So then you get all these segmental branches, so segmental arteries that eventually spill into the interlobar arteries that then spill into the arcuate arteries, cortical radiate, okay, very distal in the kidneys, these cortical radiate. So cortical cortex, okay, so these are going to be found in the cortex. And then eventually the afferent arterioles. Okay, now this is where it gets really important. Okay, these afferent arterioles that push blood into the glomerulus, very important structure. That then branch off into these efferent arterioles, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the efferent will split into the vasa recta and then the peritubular capillaries that then spill into the cortical radiate, the arcuate vein, interlobar vein, renal vein, and eventually back to the inferior vena cava into the right atrium.